A millionaire comes home early and can't believe what he sees. It was a gray Tuesday afternoon in Chicago, the kind of light that made the whole city look suspended in mist. On the top floor of a glass tower, Ethan Morales sat before his monitor, his eyes locked on the restless dance of numbers and market graphs. Outside, the world kept moving, but for him, time only advanced when the charts did. He lived by the rhythm of profit, not by the rhythm of his heart. The phone on his desk buzzed softly. Ethan glanced at the screen. Lincoln Park Elementary School. He answered with the measured tone of a man used to making million-dollar decisions. On the other end, a woman's voice trembled, polite but urgent. "Mr. Morales, Noah has a high fever, over 103 degrees. We need someone to pick him up immediately." Ethan froze. The fluorescent light around him suddenly felt cold. He checked his watch, 3:15 in the afternoon. His wife, Emma, was in Japan for a conference. His mother lived in Florida. There was no one else. He grabbed his coat and walked out without a word, leaving the meeting notes and the startled faces of his staff behind. He canceled the call with the Japanese investors, something he hadn't done in a decade. The black Tesla slid through the city streets like a silent shadow. In the reflection on the window, Ethan saw his own face, calm, yet his eyes betrayed something new, unease, subtle but persistent. He told himself it was nothing, just a fever. But his heart beat faster than it should. By the time he turned onto the quiet street leading to the suburbs, the sky had turned amber. His house, the Morales residence, stood in the glow of dusk, elegant and utterly still. Too still. No music from Hannah's radio, no dishes clinking, no distant hum of conversation. Only silence, thick and heavy, pressing against his chest. Ethan paused at the front door. The handle was cold under his fingers. He stepped inside. The sound of his shoes on the marble echoed down the hall, multiplying until it felt like the house was breathing around him. The air was heavy, almost electric, as if the walls themselves had witnessed something unspeakable. He stopped and listened. Nothing. No footsteps, no voices, no laughter, only his heartbeat, loud and uneven. And then a scream, a sharp, piercing cry that sliced through the quiet. Not a playful shout, not a tantrum. It was the sound of pure pain and terror. For a heartbeat, Ethan stood frozen. Then instinct took over. He ran, leaving his briefcase behind, the phone clattering on the tiles. Each step pounded through the hallway like a drumbeat from the center of his chest. When his hand reached the glass door leading to the garden, he could hear his own breath echoing inside his skull. He didn't yet know what waited beyond that door, but from that instant on, nothing in Ethan Morales' life would ever be the same again. The glass door flew open, letting in a rush of cold air tinged with the scent of wet grass and dying sunlight. Ethan hurried down the steps, his heartbeat pounding like war drums in his chest. The garden stretched before him, bathed in the dim copper glow of dusk, the same place where that morning Oliver had sat laughing under Hannah's care, listening to an old song. But now the air was still, suffocating, stripped of life. And then he saw it. Under the tall maple tree, Oliver, his 12-year-old son, was tied to his wheelchair with the rough gardening rope. The cord was looped tight across his chest, binding him to the backrest. His thin wrists were lashed to the armrests, his ankles fixed to the footrests. The boy's pale skin was streaked with angry red welts, the rope biting deep, a trace of blood gleaming on his wrists. His small body trembled, head drooping forward, whispering half-breaths that barely made a sound. In front of him stood Hannah, the woman Ethan had trusted like family, the one who'd lived in his house for 3 years, who'd sung lullabies to his sons. She was shouting at the crippled child, her face twisted, her voice sharp, cruel. "Stop whining, Oliver. Do you think your father can hear you? He's busy making money. For you, for this fancy house, for all your pathetic needs." Ethan froze, every muscle locked. The world blurred, colors bleeding together, until only that image remained, his son, bound like a prisoner, shaking in silent agony. Something in him cracked. He could hear his pulse roaring in his skull, louder than his own breath. Hannah went on, venom dripping from each word. "You're weak, selfish, always wanting more. Your father doesn't want a useless boy like you. But I do. I'm the only one here for you." Something inside Ethan broke beyond repair. He moved without thought, at first slow, then faster, his footsteps crunching the gravel beneath him. Hannah turned, startled, and froze when she saw his face. "What the hell are you doing, Hannah?" His voice cut through the air, low but violent, trembling with fury. Hannah stumbled back, her phone slipping from her hand into the grass. "Oh my God, Mr. Morales, I didn't mean... I just wanted to keep him safe. He was flailing, I thought." "Shut up!" Ethan dropped to his knees beside Oliver, hands shaking as he fought the knots. The ropes were tight, biting into flesh. Each time he loosened one, he found another mark, another wound carved into the boy's skin like a silent accusation. Oliver sobbed softly. "Dad, Dad." "It's okay, son. I'm here." His voice broke, thick with grief. He pulled the boy into his arms, feeling the child's trembling body, the fragile breath against his shoulder. "I'm sorry," he whispered, his tears falling onto Oliver's hair. "I'm so sorry I wasn't here." Then he turned to Hannah. The dying sunlight painted his face in shades of red and shadow. His voice was quiet now, quieter but sharper, like the edge of glass. "You tied him up," he said. "You tied my son like an animal?" Hannah's lips quivered, but no sound came out. Ethan pointed toward the door, his tone cold, deliberate. "Get out of my house. Now. If you're not gone in 3 minutes, I'll call the police. I'll make sure you never work with children again. Ever." She stumbled backward, tears streaking her face, whether real or fake, he couldn't tell. Then turned and fled, her footsteps scattering down the gravel path. Ethan stood still, holding Oliver close against his chest. The garden fell silent once more. Only the wind moved through the leaves, and the faint, fragile sound of his son's breathing mingled with the pounding of his heart. He looked up at the fading sky and knew with a terrible certainty that this was only the beginning. The last gust of evening wind rustled through the maple leaves as Ethan sat in the garden, holding Oliver against his chest, feeling each shallow breath, each trembling sob melt into his shirt. The boy's body quivered with exhaustion, while Ethan shook with fury. When Oliver finally drifted into a fragile daze, Ethan carried him back inside, his mind wrapped in a suffocating silence, the kind that settles when a man has crossed the line between reason and despair. He had just laid his son down on the sofa when the sound of a key turning echoed from the front hall. The familiar click, so ordinary, now felt out of place. The door opened, and Claire, his sister, stepped in. She wore a cream-colored suit, her arms full of shopping bags, her face glowing from the city lights. But the glow died instantly when her eyes fell on the scene before her. Oliver, pale and shaking on the couch, wrists swollen and red, ropes strewn across the floor. "Oh my God," Claire whispered, one of the bags slipping from her hand and thudding onto the tiles. What happened here? Ethan didn't answer at once. He stood still, eyes bloodshot, voice rough as gravel when he finally spoke. "Hannah did this?" Claire gasped, clutching her chest. "No, she couldn't have. She adored Oliver." "Adored?" Ethan's laugh was hollow, brittle. "You know her better than anyone. You brought her here. You oversee everything in this house. You're here almost every day. And you didn't know?" Her eyes flickered, then steadied again. "Ethan, you're upset. You know how Oliver is. He exaggerates. Sometimes he pretends to be hurt for attention." The words struck him like a slap. He looked down, gripping his son's trembling hand. Oliver's eyes opened slowly, tears glistening in the dim light. "It's not the first time, Dad," he whispered. "Last time, when I broke Mom's music box, she tied me up too, and Aunt Claire knew." For a heartbeat, Ethan forgot how to breathe. His mind shattered, the pieces spinning in silence. He lifted his gaze to Claire, searching for denial, but what he found instead was something far worse. Not surprise, not confusion, but recognition. "You knew," he said, voice low and deliberate. "You knew." Claire backed away, tears spilling. "No, Ethan, I didn't think it was serious. Hannah said he needed discipline, that he could be manipulative. I was wrong. I was so wrong." Ethan stepped closer, every footstep like thunder. "You let my son be tortured under this roof while you smiled at me every day." "You don't understand," Claire cried. "I was trying to help. You're never here, always at work, always distant. Someone had to take care of him." Ethan stared at her, bitterness burning through the rage. "You're right. I wasn't here, but you were, Claire. You were my sister, the person I trusted most, and you betrayed that trust." Claire reached for his hand, sobbing. "Please don't say that. We're family." "No," Ethan cut her off, voice glacial. "You're not my family anymore." She froze, her eyes wide with disbelief. "Ethan, please, get out of my house now," he said. "If you're still here in 1 minute, I'll call the police and tell them you allowed my son to be abused under your watch. Leave. Now." His voice rose, shaking the air until Oliver flinched. Claire wept, stumbling backward, then fled, her heels clattering down the marble hall, fading into silence as the front door slammed shut. Ethan stood motionless, fists clenched, his breath shallow and ragged. The house was quiet again, painfully quiet. Only the faint sound of Oliver's breathing and the heavy rhythm of Ethan's heart filled the room. He sat beside his son, stroked his hair, and whispered softly, "I'm here, son. It's over. It's all over." But deep down, Ethan knew what had ended was only the surface. Beneath it, a darker shadow was just beginning to stir. That night, the house was steeped in silence, the kind that feels thick enough to touch. Ethan couldn't sleep. The clock ticked past midnight. Outside, the wind brushed through the trees, carrying the faint whisper of leaves. He had just let his head sink back when the doorbell rang. It was soft, almost hesitant, yet in the stillness, it sounded deafening. Ethan rose instantly. Dozens of thoughts flashed through his mind. Hannah? Claire? The police? He tucked the blanket around Oliver, making sure the boy was warm, then walked briskly to the front door. Through the frosted glass, he saw a small figure standing under the porch light, clutching something close to her chest. A woman, slender, her hair pulled back, her face half swallowed by the glow. When he opened the door, a trembling voice greeted him. "I'm sorry to come at this hour, Mr. Morales. I'm Lucy Harper, Oliver's physical therapist." He recognized her immediately, the quiet young woman who worked with his son, the one Oliver seemed to genuinely like. He opened the door wider. "Ms. Harper, it's late. What's going on?" Lucy stepped inside, still holding her bag tight. Her eyes found Oliver sleeping peacefully on the sofa, and her expression softened with something like grief. "I need to speak with you. About Hannah." Ethan stiffened. "What about her?" Lucy took a deep breath. Her hands trembled, but her voice carried steady conviction. "I have to confess, I noticed the marks on Oliver's arms months ago. Bruises, scratches. At first, Hannah told me he'd fallen during spasms, that it was common. But the bruises, they had rope patterns, always in the same places. I wanted to report it, but Hannah..." She broke off, gripping her bag. "Hannah threatened me. She knew about my brother, Jack. He has cerebral palsy, like Oliver. She said if I spoke up, she'd accuse me of abusing him, that she'd ruin my name, my career, my family. I panicked. I needed the job. Ethan's jaw tightened. Shame and anger twisted in his gut, but he stayed silent, letting her continue. "Why are you here now?" he asked softly. Lucy reached into her bag and pulled out a small USB drive, worn smooth from her grip. "Because today I saw Hannah running from this house. Her face was white as chalk. I knew something had happened, and I knew I couldn't stay silent any longer." Ethan took the drive. "What's on it?" "Recordings," Lucy said. "I used to record our therapy sessions, for training purposes." Sometimes she forgot I was recording. I caught her talking on the phone once, saying things that chilled me. Her voice trembled, barely above a whisper. She said, "The boy is the key. Ethan will be mine. As long as I control him, Ethan will never leave me." The air between them froze. Ethan stared at the small piece of metal in his hand, feeling as though it weighed 1,000 pounds. Hannah hadn't just hurt his son, she'd planned it. Every bruise, every scream, every lie was part of a web spun to claim him, to claim his life, through the suffering of his child. Lucy bowed her head, her words breaking. "I'm sorry, Mr. Morales. I was silent too long." Ethan looked up, his eyes cold but burning with something fierce beneath the surface. "No," he said quietly. "You came, and that means it's not too late." After Lucy left, silence swallowed the house again. Ethan sat alone in the living room, the small USB drive glinting faintly on the table like something radioactive. He didn't play it. Something inside him feared the sound it would unleash, the sound that, once heard, could never be undone. Then a sound, faint, almost a whisper, paper sliding across wood. Ethan turned toward the hallway. Lying just beyond the front door was a brown envelope, thick, unmarked, sealed with care. Across the front, in dark ink, 2 simple words. "For you." A chill rippled through him. He picked it up carefully, the paper crisp beneath his fingers, and tore the flap open. Inside was a photograph, large, slightly yellowed around the edges, old, perhaps 12 years or more. When the morning light hit it, Ethan's breath caught. In the picture were Claire and Hannah. They looked younger, radiant, standing close together like lifelong friends. Between them, in their arms, lay a newborn baby, wrapped in a soft blue blanket. Claire's gaze was gentle, almost maternal, her smile proud and serene. But Hannah's expression was different, her smile too still, too satisfied, as if she were holding something that belonged entirely to her. Ethan flipped the photo over. Scrawled in a handwriting he knew too well, Claire's, were the words, "To my dear Hannah, together we can have it all." His hand began to tremble. He looked back at the baby. A boy, fair skin, wisps of brown hair, tiny hands poking from the blanket, and on the left wrist, clearly visible, a small heart-shaped birthmark. Ethan's stomach turned. He'd seen that mark countless times, in the mornings when he bathed his son, in photos, in moments of laughter. Oliver had that same mark. He turned the photo over again. The date read March 2013, but Oliver was born in June 2013. The 3 in the month looked smudged, overwritten. Ethan grabbed a magnifier from the desk. Beneath the ink, faint but visible, was the original number, 6. The date had been changed. He drew a sharp breath. The photo was older than it appeared. It showed something that shouldn't exist, or something that someone wanted him to believe didn't. If Claire and Hannah had known each other long before Hannah came to work for him, why had Claire never mentioned it? And that baby, the baby with the birthmark, who was he really? Oliver, or someone else entirely? Ethan sank into the chair, the photograph trembling in his grip. The morning light filled the room, soft but unkind, revealing every line of fatigue and fury on his face. A cold realization rose slowly inside him, thick and suffocating. Claire's betrayal ran deeper than neglect or silence. She and Hannah shared a bond far older, far darker, tied to something that had begun long before the first bruise on Oliver's skin. Morning arrived in silence. The first light of day slipped through the curtains, cutting a thin, cold line of brightness across the ivory wall, pale as a blade. Ethan sat at his desk, the creased photograph lying before him beside the small USB drive Lucy had left. The world around him was eerily quiet, only the ticking of the clock, steady and merciless, like a hammer striking his thoughts. He stared at the picture, searching for a flaw, a detail out of place that could convince him this was all coincidence. But the longer he looked, the more he realized there was no chance, no accident. Everything had been arranged long ago. He lifted the phone and dialed the number of a private investigation firm a friend had once mentioned, Henderson & Cole Investigations, specialists in financial fraud and identity tracing. His voice was low, hoarse, but decisive. "I need you to verify something immediately. No one can know. The photo, the medical records, everything connected to two names, Hannah Walsh and Claire Morales." The voice on the other end was calm and professional. "We'll find the truth." 3 days passed like 3 years. Ethan lived between two extremes, the cold logic of his mind and the storm rising inside his chest. By day, he tried to hold on to routine, reading to Oliver, making breakfast, forcing a smile at his son's innocent questions. But when night came and the house grew still, when Oliver's breathing faded into sleep, Ethan sat alone in the dark, the light of his laptop reflected on his hollow face. In his eyes, under the heavy rings of exhaustion, burned a look that no longer belonged to a businessman, but to a man trying to remember why he still existed. On the third afternoon, an email arrived. The subject line was short, sharp, "Findings." 2 simple words, but they made his heart seize. Ethan opened it, sweat slicking his palms. The screen lit up, and the lines of text appeared slowly, each one falling like a blow. Photo data analysis, device, iPhone 5, actual capture date, May 15th, 2013, 23 minutes past 11 in the morning. Confirmed. The photo was taken 12 years prior, not 9, as marked. 12 years. The number struck him like a cold wave. The photo had been taken precisely when Oliver was only a few months old. He scrolled further, eyes fixed on the screen. St. Mary's Hospital. Maternity records of Emma Morales show signs of tampering. Nurse listed on the birth log, Monica Evans. No individual with that name exists in the National Medical Registry. Facial analysis from hospital CCTV confirms. The person signing the record was Hannah Walsh, under a false identity. Ethan dropped the mouse. The room spun. Hannah? In the delivery room? She wasn't the woman who entered their lives years later. She had been there from the very beginning, in the first breath of deception he never saw coming. He bent over, knees hitting the floor, struggling for air as his chest tightened, his lungs turning to stone. He picked up the phone again with trembling hands and scrolled further. DNA test results, comparison of Ethan Morales and Oliver Morales, genetic match probability 0%. Conclusion, no biological relation between father and son. The world went silent. No sound remained but the pounding of his heart, frantic and meaningless. He sat frozen, the screen blurring behind tears he didn't know were falling. In his mind, Emma appeared, lying on the hospital bed, pale but glowing, her weak hand gripping his, her trembling voice filled with wonder as she whispered through exhaustion, "Look, Ethan, our son." They had smiled. They had cried. They had believed it was the beginning of a life. But now, everything was a lie. Ethan lowered his head to the table, breath ragged. The last line of the report glowed on the blue screen, cutting through the dim room. High probability. Emma Morales' delivery was compromised. 2 individuals directly involved. Dr. Claire Morales, and nurse under false identity, Hannah Walsh. Hypothesis: the biological infant either died at birth or was switched immediately after delivery. He read it again and again until the words carved themselves into him. Claire. His sister, the one he had trusted without question, the one who had promised to care for Emma, as if she were my own. And Hannah, the woman he thought he'd hired years later, smiling gently as she first held Oliver. They had been there together in that sacred moment between life and death, when he had been too blinded by joy to see the truth. He remembered Lucy's words, "The boy is the key. Ethan will be mine." Now the sentence returned, whispering like a ghost. Hannah hadn't just wanted to control Oliver. She wanted to possess his entire life, and Claire had been the hand that opened the door for her. Ethan rose unsteadily and walked to the window. The city outside still pulsed with life, bright and indifferent. He looked down at his trembling hands, hands that once signed million-dollar contracts, built an empire, shaped futures. Now they could do nothing but shake in the wake of loss. His marriage was a lie, his career an illusion, and the bond he cherished above all, the love between father and son, was nothing more than a role in someone else's performance. They had taken everything from him, piece by piece, breath by breath, dream by dream. He sat back down, staring at the old photograph and the USB drive beside it. Two small, silent objects, yet they contained the collapse of an entire world. A dry laugh slipped from his throat, low and strange, somewhere between pain and disbelief. "They took everything from me," he whispered into the empty room, his voice rough, almost unrecognizable. "But there's still one thing left." He reached out, fingertips brushing the edge of the photo, his gaze cold, steady. The truth. It was a gray Saturday morning. The sky above Chicago hung low and heavy, sunlight wandering, lost among the clouds. Ethan stood before the window, staring down at the city that kept on moving while he felt hollow, like the glass before him. After countless sleepless nights, there was no chaos left inside him, only the calm precision of a man who understood that to survive he had to act like a strategist. He began to gather everything: the photographs, the USB drive, the hospital files, the reports from Henderson and Cole, each detail sorted, encrypted, backed up, copied onto 3 hard drives, one sent directly to his attorney. Everything had to be perfect, airtight. Then he called the police chief, a man who still owed him a favor from a charitable case years ago. His voice was steady, almost emotionless. "I have evidence of infant substitution, falsified medical records, and identity fraud. 2 names, Claire Morales and Hannah Walsh." A plan took shape, precise as a chessboard. While the police worked to secure arrest warrants, Ethan's legal team quietly froze all of Claire's assets, her bank accounts, properties, and corporate shares. Within 12 hours, everything she owned was locked. The seaside apartment in Sarasota, where Claire had been hiding since Ethan had cut contact, became the first target. That afternoon, in a bright apartment overlooking the ocean, Claire sat before a mirror, dark-ringed eyes reflecting exhaustion, her hair tangled from sleepless nights. When a knock came, she assumed it was housekeeping. But when she opened the door, the blue flash of a police badge lit her pale face. "Dr. Claire Morales," the officer said firmly, "you are under arrest for medical fraud, infant substitution, and conspiracy in identity falsification." Claire froze. The glass in her hand fell and shattered on the floor. She didn't resist. When the cuffs clicked shut around her wrists, she whispered one trembling question. "It was Ethan, wasn't it?" The officer said nothing, but the answer was already in her eyes. That evening at the police station, Ethan entered the interrogation room. Claire sat across the table, her hands cuffed, the sterile white light making her face appear even paler. She looked up, a weary smile flickering like ash. "You won," she murmured, her voice a mix of bitterness and defeat. "This isn't a game, Claire," Ethan said, his voice low but firm. "Tell me, why?" Claire let out a soft, broken laugh. "Because you never understood. You had everything, the company, the money, the perfect wife, the family. And me? I had nothing but night shifts and a tiny apartment." Then Hannah came along. She worked in the maternity ward, clever, ambitious. We were the same, Ethan. We both wanted to escape the shadows of other people's success. When Hannah's baby died during birth, she lost her mind. And Emma, she went into a difficult labor. The doctors said your baby might not make it, so we switched them. One child lived in place of another. Simple as that. Ethan couldn't breathe. "Simple?" he repeated. "And what about Emma? What about me?" Claire lowered her gaze, her voice trembling. "I thought it was for the best, so you wouldn't lose everything, so we could keep what we had." "Keep what we had?" Ethan repeated, a dry, bitter laugh escaping him. "You stole my life, my child, and you call that keeping?" She broke down then, tears spilling onto the metal table, forming small, shining pools. Ethan watched without pity, without hate, only emptiness. When they led her away, he didn't look up. The door closed with a heavy thud, footsteps echoing down the hallway, until they vanished into silence. That night, Ethan drove north to the outskirts where police had said Hannah Walsh was hiding, in an old motel near the highway. The sky hung low, rain falling in thin gray sheets that blurred the yellow glow of streetlights. He stopped in front of room 12, stepped out, his shoes sinking into cold puddles. When he knocked, Hannah opened the door, her eyes swollen, hair tangled, a suitcase half-packed behind her. She froze, trembling. "Ethan!" Her voice cracked. "I knew you'd come." He didn't speak, only looked at her. Under the dim light, her face looked drained, her lips quivering. "Claire told me to do it," she burst out, tears mingling with the rain. "She said your baby was too weak, that he wouldn't survive. She said this was the only way to save us all. I only wanted to help, I swear. I loved you, Ethan. From the moment I saw you holding that baby, I thought I could do anything to keep you." Ethan stood motionless. His eyes held no anger now, only the exhaustion of a soul that had gone beyond pain. Slowly, he took out his phone and pressed a single key. Outside, red and blue lights flashed through the rain, painting Hannah's face with streaks of color. She froze, realizing it was over. "Please, don't," she pleaded through sobs. "I don't want to lose you." Ethan didn't answer. He turned, opened the door, and stepped out as her cries rose behind him, blending with the shrill wail of police sirens cutting through the night. He walked down the long corridor, rain striking his coat, cold and relentless. Not once did he look back. Outside, the rain fell harder. Red and blue lights danced across the wet asphalt like blades of glass. Ethan watched as the officers led the two women into separate cars, their faces pale, stripped of arrogance and deceit, leaving only emptiness. Late spring carried a soft warmth, the air still tinged with the scent of last night's rain. The small house in the suburbs glowed in the morning light, birdsong weaving through the faint sound of wheels rolling across damp brick. Oliver laughed as Ethan pushed his wheelchair into the garden. For the first time in months, that laughter rang out without the shadow of fear behind it. 6 months had passed since that stormy night. Hannah and Claire had both been sentenced. The media frenzy had come and gone. The world had moved on. Only Ethan seemed to live in a different reality, where faith had been shattered, but love was being rebuilt, one small piece at a time. He had sold the grand house in the city and bought a modest home surrounded by trees, an hour from downtown. There, he and Oliver learned how to start again, cooking together, reading before bed, listening to music in the morning. The scars on Oliver's wrists had healed, and the wounds inside Ethan, though still tender, had begun to close. That afternoon, while Ethan was watering the plants, he heard the sound of a familiar car pulling up outside. He looked up, heart tightening. The car door opened, and Emma stepped out. Her long hair was tied back, her face tired from the long flight, but her eyes, those gentle, steady eyes, still carried the warmth that had once made him fall in love. Ethan didn't speak. He just stood there. She walked toward him, placed a trembling hand on his shoulder, and said softly, "I'm home, Ethan." He nodded, his throat tight. "I was going to write to you," he murmured, but there weren't any words big enough for what's happened. Emma looked at him for a long moment. In her eyes were pain and understanding, intertwined. "You don't need to explain," she said quietly. "I know everything. The police contacted me in Japan. I heard it all, every detail, and all I could think about was you and Oliver." From inside the house, Oliver heard her voice, a sound that had lived only in his dreams. He spun his wheelchair and hurried to the porch, eyes wide. "Mom!" Emma dropped to her knees and wrapped him in her arms, tears spilling down her cheeks. "I missed you so much, Oliver." "I missed you too," he whispered. "I was scared you weren't coming back." "No, sweetheart," she said, pressing a kiss to his forehead. "I'm never leaving again." In that moment, Ethan watched them, the woman he had loved, the boy he had once thought he'd lost, and realized that amid everything stolen from him, some things had survived untouched. This family, battered but standing, was still here. That night, after Oliver had fallen asleep, Ethan and Emma sat together on the porch. The night breeze carried the scent of grass and the hum of crickets. The warm light from the living room glowed against their glasses of wine. "I used to think that if I didn't come home you'd fall apart," Emma said quietly. Ethan gave a faint smile. "I did fall apart, but Oliver pulled me back. He's the only good thing that was left." Emma looked down, then took his hand gently. "I know he's not biologically yours." He met her eyes, calm and certain. "I know, but that doesn't matter anymore. I chose to love him, as if he were my own flesh and blood, and maybe that's the truest thing I've ever done." A soft breeze stirred the curtain behind them. In that silence,